Welcome to the Horn Takes podcast, your very rough around the edges Texas sports talk destination. I'm your host, Sean Redfern. It's Tuesday. That means a couple things. That means we're one day closer to college football on Saturday. The other thing it means is today's show is the after action review. We don't have a Texas game to do an after action review on, but we do have our Trace Otra games from week 7 recap. We'll also have 4 keys and a prediction for the remainder of the 2023 schedule for you guys today. We'll do the quick and dirty on the Houston Cougars before we head into Deep Dive Thursday, 12 noon. That's where we'll get real statistical and analyze this matchup between the Texas Longhorns and the Houston Cougars. We'll also have some random college football thoughts for you guys later in the show. By the way, those of you that may just be watching or have never watched or have watched before and haven't watched in a while, we kind of changed the format of the show up. We used to go Tuesday nights, Thursday nights, 6 p.m. Central Time. Decided I wanted to go every day, basically. So we go Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday at noon. Sometimes we have to flex it 30 minutes one way or the other, but nothing giant there. It's always going to be right around midday. And I always put it up on Twitter. Monday's Exaggeration Monday. That's where we just get the Saturday game off our chest, good or bad. Tuesday's an after action review, and that's where we put our thinking cap on a little bit and are less emotional about the game on Saturday. We really just kind of dig into the game, see what went well, what didn't go well. Thursday's Deep Dive Thursday, and that's where we dig into the next opponent. And then Friday's Prediction Friday. We give you our Trace Otra games for that week, as well as our prediction for the Texas Longhorns. We generally do a live Wednesday night at 6 p.m. Central on TikTok. You can check us out on Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube at Horn Takes. If you guys check it out, give me a follow, give me a subscribe. I appreciate it. It won't cost you a thing. If you just like to listen to podcasts, you can find us at horntakespodcast.buzzsprout.com or anywhere you listen to podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all the podcast places. We're there. Week 7 Trace Otra games recap. We were 2 for 3 in week 7. We talked last week about how we've never had a perfect week and we've never had a 100% imperfect week. We've been 1-3 or 2-3 all season long. Fortunately for us, we've been 2-3 one more time than we've been 1-3. So we're 11-10 on the season. Not too good, not too bad. To be fair, I picked some pretty top dog games for this. Most of these games are ranked opponents games. Sometimes you never know what's going to happen. Game 1, we had number 8 Oregon against number 7 Washington. They're in Washington. I thought this game would be a shootout. I thought the defensive numbers for both of these teams were skewed. If you went back and looked at their numbers defensively prior to this game, some actually really good numbers defensively for both teams. But I look at that schedule that they've both played, and I just go, man, it's fool's gold. I thought Oregon is more balanced on offense, and I still think Oregon is more balanced on offense. I like the over in this game, which was 66, and I had Oregon winning it 41-34 on the road. Of course, the game was 36-33, Washington. Really good game. I didn't get to see the whole game. I got to see the tail end, probably the second. Matter of fact, here's where I got to watch the game. We were driving home from my son's baseball game. We had just pulled into the Walmart parking lot to pick up something that my wife ordered ahead, and the score was 26-19, I think. Washington. By the time I got home, which we literally live 2 minutes from Walmart, by the time I got home, got outside, got the TV set where I wanted it, Oregon was leading the game. They scored 2 touchdowns. It must have been really quick. I don't know. I don't know what happened with that. But big drive there late. by Penix. Penix did Penix things once again. I thought Oregon really missed some opportunities inside the red zone. Not just the fact that they got turned away and had to turn the ball over. I just think inside the 10, man, it's just really rough to get that far down the field and not get points. And, if he would have took points on 2 of those trips where they got turned out, that last field goal wouldn't have mattered. Tough loss for Oregon. You know what? I think Oregon and Washington, a lot like Texas and Oklahoma, I feel like those teams are going to meet up in their championship game. And I think I still really like Oregon. I think, again, they're more balanced. But we are 0-1 after the first game, looking like going to be a rough weekend. Then came along number 10 USC on the road at number 21 Notre Dame. Listen, folks, I talked about Notre Dame and I said, look, their early success was fool's gold. A lot of people were talking about Notre Dame and having a chance to go to the playoff. I don't understand why. I mean, sure, they were dominating opponents, but they weren't playing anybody. And then I flipped around and said, you know what, though? USC cannot stop a soul. And I said, this Notre Dame team reminds me a lot of the Utah teams that have knocked off USC the last couple years. Really good in the trenches. Real tough teams. They're tough because Lou Holtz said they're tough. I said Notre Dame gets this one done. Pick the upset. 34-31 was my prediction. Of course, the game was 48-20. Caleb Williams had just a really, really rough night. And you know what, though? Those were all forced turnovers. Notre Dame defensively got after their ass. Really impressive performance. And I don't know who that number 0 guy is. I don't know if he's a linebacker or a safety or what he is, but I think he had 2 picks. I think one of them was for a touchdown, and I think he got a fumble recovery for a touchdown. Just a hell of a game by that kid. Final game of the night, number 25 Miami at number 12 North Carolina. Both those teams were in the top 20 of scoring offense and scoring defense. So looking at it, man, 2 pretty good teams, right? Thought QB play would be a big factor. Was surprised to see that based on efficiency, Tyler Van Slyke was about 20 points higher than Drake May. Thought the weather might be a factor. It supposedly rained there Friday night. The forecast was rain all day. I don't know if it did rain all day. The field did look a little tore up, so it looked like it was kind of moist. So I thought maybe that would keep the score down a little bit. Ultimately, I thought to myself, there's just no way that a team that lost to a 3-3 Georgia Tech team at home is going on the road and beating Mac Brown at North Carolina. It just ain't going to happen. So I picked North Carolina 23-20. Final score of that one was 41-31. Really, that Tez guy, Tez Williams, I think, was a guy that had been ruled ineligible. And I got to be honest, I don't know the backstory about that, but I think, and I didn't even hear it during the game, but I think he was a guy that for whatever reason was ruled ineligible. Finally, the NCAA grants him his eligibility, so he gets to play. And I think this was the first game he got to play, and he had a hell of a game. So look out for North Carolina going down the rest of the season, man. They got some weapons offensively. They run the ball well. So 2 for 3. I'll take it. I'm still looking for that perfect Trace Otra games weekend. Maybe we get it this weekend. I don't know. 4 keys and a prediction for the Texas Longhorns moving forward to finish out this 2023 regular season. We talked about it on Monday with Nash at Nash Talks Texas that this is a team that's capable of winning out, including a rematch with Oklahoma if that's the way all that goes down. I think for Texas, they need to win out to really feel good about that. these huge conferences with no divisions, it's really rough. In some cases, you don't even get a chance to play into the game. I mean, there could be situations where a team that just gets the luck of the draw on a schedule gets in over a team that has played a really good schedule but lost a game, or maybe even lost 2 games. It seems kind of absurd, but it is what it is. Talked about how this Texas team, super talented. The roster is loaded. The coaching staff has continuity. Only 2 guys off of the original staff have left. So these guys have been coaching some of these kids for 2.5 seasons now. All that being said, they still have problems. They still have a tendency to shoot themselves in the foot sometimes. Really talking about the penalties and the procedure penalties. Those are the ones that really hurt. There's like effort penalties, like running into the kicker. I think even to some extent, pass interferences can be like an effort type of deal versus just an egregious trying to cheat, basically. Sometimes you get a little too handsy. Sometimes you get called for that. This team had a lot of mental breakdowns in the Texas OU game, blown assignments in pass defense, turnovers on offense. This team situationally has not been great on offense this year. They're not good in the red zone. 11 for 24 touchdowns in the red zone. Only converting in the red zone at like 83%, which I think it's on the bottom half of the country in Division I football. They were bad in critical drives against Oklahoma. We talked about giving up points the last drive of the first half, giving up points the first drive of the second half, and then giving up points again the last drive of the second half to OU. Just can't do it. Got to win some of those. And then we talked about how they have a tendency, and I don't know, it's probably a discussion or it's probably a topic that warrants more discussion, but it just seems like this team performs better as an underdog than they do as a clear favorite. I mean, I think it would take a lot of in-depth analysis to prove that one way or another. But I think if you ask the average Texas fan, if you ask 10 Texas fans whether they were average fans or not, the direct question of does this team play down to its opponents, I feel like the majority of them would say yes. So for the sake of argument, let's just say that's true. They're playing a lot of opponents going down the stretch that they're going to be favored. And in some of these games, they're going to be heavily favored. And can they figure out how to mentally not give a shit about that and just only care about, man, when I played football, like my entire goal, every single play was to just physically destroy somebody on the other side of the line of scrimmage for me. I didn't even give this is a no shit. I hardly ever knew what the score of a football game was that I played in. To me, my sole focus every single play was whose ass was I fixing to whip on the other side of me. And that's it. And if every single player on the field does that every single play, and you commit to that and you can execute that, the score doesn't matter because you're going to win every fucking game. And maybe I'm simple-minded. I don't know. Football for me was an outlet to go be very violent. I was raised in a house where you didn't go pick fights. And even if you didn't pick the fight and you got in a fight, you were going to get punished for it. So for me, being able to go on a football field and just attack people physically was like a big deal. And so I loved it. I loved contact. The day I finished my very last down of college football, I loved to go have contact with other dudes on a football field with me hitting them as hard as I could hit them. And I didn't care who we were playing. I didn't care if we were playing the worst team on the schedule, the best team on the schedule. I've played against guys that have played Division I football, NFL football. I didn't give a shit. I don't know. I think if you're going to play football, you should want to destroy everybody. And it shouldn't matter what uniform they're wearing. It shouldn't matter how good they are. So this whole and I think I think you could argue that the perception is true. It's reality. Texas plays down. They also play up. The problem is when you're as talented as Texas, there's not much up and there's a whole lot of down. Keys for success for this team in the final half of the season for me, 4 keys. Lean on the run game. Make the run game more a part of your philosophy. Had a really good conversation with Nash at Nash Talks Texas yesterday. Find him on Twitter. Find him on YouTube. He also does at Texas Clips on YouTube where he condenses every single play of every single Texas game. So you don't have to see the commercials. You don't have to, none of the crap in between plays, just play after play after play, every single play. Really awesome. Really cool for like going back and finding out what really happened during a game. But we were having a good conversation with Nash yesterday, and he mentioned, man, I just couldn't ask him to give the ball to Brooks anymore. And I don't, when I say run the ball more, I don't even know that I mean more carries. I just mean focus on that. We come out every single game. We throw a sideways pass for a loss. And very rarely during the first drive of games do we run the ball that much. I mean, I think if you're Sark, you know, I mean, you don't want to always come out every single game and run the ball the first play of the game because then everybody knows it's coming. But what you're doing, Sark, is everybody knows it's not coming. Jonathan Brooks, 726 yards on the season, 6.7 yards per carry, 6 touchdowns. The kid is rushing at a tilt that's good enough for 9th in the country right now. And there's only one guy that's ahead of him that hasn't played 1 or 2 more games than him. So lean on the run game, man. Make that who you are. Because right now, I don't feel like the Texas identity is a running team. And I get balance. Nash talked about the balance yesterday. Nash likes to look at the numbers, and I like to look at the numbers too. But I think there's more to it than just necessarily the numbers. Yeah, Texas is balanced. You look at a lot of their games, their yardages are real close between rushing and passing. The attempts are real close between rushing and passing. I get all that. You can still do that, but flip the philosophy of your team on its head. Jonathan Brooks is the catalyst of this offense, despite the fact that there are weapons everywhere. Let's make him the feature, I guess, is the best way to say it. Number 2, got to be better in the red zone offensively. We talked about it. 24 trips, 11 touchdowns. That's 46%. That's way too low for a team this talented. And not only are they talented skill-wise, they're talented on the offensive line. They've done an excellent job recruiting the offensive line, developing some of these guys. Tied for 70th overall in red zone offense. at 83%. So I was right on that. Got to do better in the red zone. You cannot get turned away against anybody from the 1 yard line with 4 attempts at it. You just can't. Championship teams punch that in over and over and over and over and over again. Number 3, they got to make more big plays defensively. Last year, the sacks were abysmal, 27. This year, through half of the schedule, they've only got 14. So they're 1 ahead of where they were last year if you break that out evenly across the season. Got teams like Louisville last season have 50 sacks. 50. So Texas came in about half that last season. You extrapolate it out, they're going to be 28, so they'll be 1 better in 2023 than they were in 2022. Turnovers. Got to figure out a way to force more turnovers. Last season, they had 13 all season. So far through 6 games, they have 8 turnovers, which again is tied for 77th in the country. So it's not good. The majority of the turnovers this team does get are interceptions or fumbles that are like mistakes by the offense. Go back to that KU game. Texas had 1 turnover in that game. It was a fumble recovery. It was on a 4th down. And it was just a situation where the running back and the quarterback weren't on the same page in the zone scheme, the zone read scheme. And I think the running back tried to take it away from the quarterback, and it just ended up falling on the ground. Texas falls on top of it. But Texas isn't like knocking the ball loose defensively. Again, you look at sacks, you look at turnovers. This team is way too talented to not be causing more big plays on defense. And those are like, I think, the 2 ways that the defense can really create big plays. But there's also just your run-of-the-mill big plays, like being in good coverage and batting the ball away. Causing the quarterback, getting so much pressure on the quarterback that he just has to throw it away. Tackles for loss. I mean, I think they're okay at tackles for loss. I should have went back and looked at that from a statistical perspective. But they should do more. Dominant defenses do more. They create more big plays. And then finally, number 4 key moving forward, I think, for this team is to figure out the back end on defense. We've seen at times the pass rush be good. And when it's good, the coverage is usually good enough that quarterbacks can't find open guys. Or if they do, they're highly contested plays. But when the pass rush doesn't force those quick decisions and quick throws, our DBs get lost on the back end. We've seen lots of big plays down the field just in the one-on-one game. And then we've seen lots of big plays in the soft zones at critical times during games. I think they've been rotating a lot of guys in and out in the defensive backfield, especially those safety positions. You got to find, 2 or 3 guys that can play safety and let those be the guys that can play safety. I don't trust a rotation there as much as I trust a rotation at the linebacker position and especially the defensive line position. So we talked about the 4 keys. Now here's the prediction for the final 6 games of the regular season in 2023. Texas is going to be favored in every single game the rest of the season. And I think if they do win those 6 games and Oklahoma does do what it needs to do, Texas will be favored in the Big 12 championship game against Oklahoma. I think Texas is going to get it done. They're going to figure out a way to work on those 4 areas that we just talked about. They're going to improve in those areas. I think Texas is going to wind up 11-1. Steve Sarkisian has never had more than 9 wins in a season. You look at his record, and I don't have the numbers in front of me. He's around 58% as a head coach win percentage. His conference record is somewhere right around in there as well. At Texas, he's a little bit lower on win percentage. I think he's like 51%, 52%. I think this is finally the year that Steve Sarkisian is not only going to eclipse that 9-win barrier that he's been bumping his head against, but I think he's going to get 2 more than that. He's going to be 11-1 at the end of the season, and Texas is going to play for the Big 12 championship on December 2nd. To do that, they're going to have to get through the Houston Cougars this weekend. So the quick and dirty on the Houston Cougars, Texas leads this series 17 games to 6 with 2 ties. Last meeting was in 2002, and that just, I don't know why, but I felt like Texas and Houston had played way more recently than that. That game was a 41-11 victory by Texas. Capped off a 7-game win streak going back to 1992 for the Texas Longhorns. Early line on this game, I think the early line, like the very early line, Sunday afternoon, Monday morning, was somewhere around 21. That's crept up to 23. So Texas is a 23-point favorite in this game. Man, I know it's Houston, but that seems like a lot of points. And when you look at the fact that it's on the road game is usually good for 3 to 6 points. Kind of shocked to see the line that high. Especially coming off a game for Texas where they, still in a position to win that game against Oklahoma, but just didn't play well. From almost the very beginning of the game to the end of that game, so many missed opportunities and so many places where they shot themselves in the foot. I don't know. Pass heavy offense under head coach Dana Holgorsen. They're gonna test Texas deep. Newsflash, PK. They're going to test you deep, and if you sit back there and give Donovan Smith a lot of time, it can be effective. Houston is really, really terrible on defense, like most teams coached by Mike Leach disciples. Said it late last week. Donovan Smith is a guy that scares the hell out of me. He's a threat in the running game, the QB run game, not only the design stuff, but the off schedule stuff in the passing game. And he's a really streaky passer. He's a guy that can get hot. And he's already got confidence against Texas. He beat Texas last year as a member of the Texas Tech Red Raiders up in Lubbock. He ended up completing 16 straight passes against West Virginia, with the final one being that 49-yard Hail Mary. So there's your quick and dirty on the Houston Cougars. We will get a lot deeper into the Houston Cougars and this matchup between Texas and the Houston Cougars on Deep Dive Thursday, 12 noon Central Time. Random college football thoughts. How about Mack Brown at North Carolina? Going way back in his career, Mack Brown had North Carolina on the cusp for multiple years. Just never could get past Florida State. Goes to Texas, has a lot of success, wins a national championship, plays in another. Program goes downhill. They let him go back at North Carolina. In just a few short years, he's got North Carolina back in what looks like could be a battle with Florida State for the ACC title, and maybe, just maybe, a shot in the college football playoff. How cool of a story would that be? Texas A&M fans firing Jimbo again. Simply inconceivable that a guy that's recruited as well as Jimbo Fisher has should not have the best team in the country right now, according to Aggies. All sorts of good stuff on the interwebs from Aggie fans. Aggie fans are convinced, well, at least one Aggie fan is convinced that they could go get Kirby Smart from Georgia, better facilities at Texas A&M, more money to throw at NIL, best fans in the country, they say. And then you got part of them talking about bringing Deion in, which I think that would be hilarious. Could you imagine Deion Sanders at that redneck school? And I don't mean that. I'm a redneck, folks. I grew up in Northeast Texas, man. I'm about as country as you can get. That cult there at Texas A&M is something else. And I don't know if the cult of Deion and the cult of Texas A&M mesh well together. It would certainly be a circus. It would be a circus unlike any other circus the world has ever seen. So if things continue to trend the way they're trending, is the Jimbo getting fired talk real? Like, to the people that actually matter, are they starting to have these conversations about Jimbo Fisher's future at Texas A&M? Are they prepared to dish out the massive payout they're going to have to dish out to get rid of him? What a huge mistake there. That's why I'm always so leery about these long-term, big-time contracts. I mean, yeah, you could argue, well, if you don't pay him, somebody will. I just don't know how realistic that is. You certainly have leverage. Like, it's not easy just for a coach to just pick up, move someplace else, start over again, because that's what you have to do. And honestly, who the hell is beating down the door for Jimbo Fisher, who's been just a massive underachiever at Texas A&M? He's kind of been a massive underachiever everywhere. He lucked into a national championship, probably never getting back to another one. What a mess down in Aggie land. Colorado has probably the biggest meltdown of the season. Friday night against the Stanford Cardinal, leading 29-0. They lose in overtime, 46-43. Folks, this is, I made some comments in the offseason about some unreal expectations that all of these prime cultists and all of these Colorado fans that have come out of the woodwork had about this team. RJ Young started popping off about Colorado not being a top 25 team in the very first AP top 25 poll. And I knew then that, like, the never-ending talk about Colorado was going to be just completely unbearable. And up until recently, it has been. And thank God. I mean, and I don't have nothing against the Colorado team, man. I hope they do well. Everybody, Colorado and Deion should be blaming the media for all the quote unquote hate they're getting. But I made some comments about how this team was just not ready in the trenches. The roster was just not there for this team to be consistently good. I think they're right there from a skill position perspective, but they don't have enough dudes up front. They cannot run the ball. They cannot stop other people from running the ball. They cannot get after the other quarterback, and they can't keep anybody from the opposing defense off of Shadur Sanders. So these crazy ass. I mean, I saw people talking about how they were going to win the Pac-12 this year. I tried to tell y'all, and instead of y'all just listening and thinking about it, even maybe just like even considering it, I got called every name in the book you could possibly think of. Every knee-jerk excuse, every knee-jerk reaction, every programmed response that people had at their disposal was launched at me for simply saying, man, I don't think they have a good enough roster to be that good. And I've had my questions about Dion. I don't know that he's that great of a coach. Sure, he can bring attention to the program. He can probably help you raise some money. He knows how to use social media. Dress is kind of cool for a coach. Wears his sunglasses inside. But how good of a coach really is this guy? And if you're up 29-0 and you lose a game against a really bad Stanford team, it's hard. It's going to be hard for anybody to argue that you're a really good coach. So as good as this season started off for Colorado, it's now trending heavily the other direction. And they still got some tough games to go. It'll be interesting to see if this team can hold it together. I know they can be front runners, but it'll be interesting to see if they can hold it together through a lot of this adversity, and how much of sort of the effectiveness of all this hype is in keeping this group together and keeping them moving forward towards a common goal. It's not any fun to lose games like that. I can tell you that right now. The grass is back at DKR, folks. Thank you. But not yet. 2026. It was announced yesterday, or there was some article yesterday that said in 2026, when all these new indoor facilities and all these new Texas athletic facilities are finished, part of that project is to get the turf the fuck up out of DKR and the grass back down at DKR. I don't know why they took the grass up in the first place. Never been a fan of turf. I'll take that back. When I was in high school, I thought it was cool to go play on turf. But that was back in the day. And you kids, you parents that have young kids, y'all may not know this. Every field didn't have turf when I was in high school. In fact, very, very few did. And the ones that did, it was that shitty ass hard turf. It wasn't even like that field turf stuff they have today that more closely simulates grass. This was like a legit carpet put down on the ground, basically. It sucked. But at the time, it was cool, man. We got to get some turf shoes. Meant you were playing at a big stadium, you know, like a big place. I played at Texas Stadium. Got to play on that turf. So huge welcome of the grass back to Darrell K. Royal. We appreciate that. CDC, if you had anything to do with it, I don't know who had anything to do. I imagine he had something to do with parts of the conversation. I'm sure the coaching staff was like, guys, it's 140 freaking degrees down on the field for a September kick. We got to get some grass. We got to do something about that. I think you look at like most of the SEC stadiums and their grass. The game is supposed to be played on grass. So thank you. Thank you for bringing the grass back to Darrell K. Royal. going to be nice. Check us out again on Deep Dive Thursday. That'll be Thursday at noon Central Time. Again, we'll have a statistical analysis of this Texas at Houston football game that comes up on 3 o'clock Central on Saturday on Fox. We'll have some more random college football thoughts, I'm sure. Check out the podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. Find us on Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube at Horn Takes. Follow, subscribe. I'd appreciate it. Won't cost you guys a thing. Email me at horntakespodcast@gmail.com with all your questions, comments, concerns, and criticisms. I love them all. Guys, I would do a mailbag. If you guys would just send me some questions or even tell me I suck, we would have a segment on this show responding to all that types of shit. So if y'all want to get in some arguments about college football or send me some legit questions, horntakespodcast@gmail.com. You guys have a good one. Get hooked.